Well, welcome everyone to this week's Menlo Midweek podcast. My name is Mark.
And I'm Phil.
And we're kicking off a new series.
We are, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It sounds a lot more joyous than what the weekend probably was, but it's just such an important topic, and I'm so glad that we can bring this issue of mental health and where that intersects with faith and how we can kind of peel back some of the layers of which that gets complicated. And I just feel like it's such an important series to do. And can you talk about, Phil, why we're doing it in this month specifically?
Yeah, so, you know this, but, if we think about the calendar, there are these moments in the calendar that there's already sort of some cultural breeze to something. So, you think about Christmas or Easter, think about the way you're kind of getting ready for fall. Well, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Mm-hmm. And so you may have, heard that on something that you watched online, or you may have seen an ad for that somewhere. And so to be able to hopefully take a moment where culture may already be prompting us to think about and talk about it and view it through a spiritual lens, and hopefully do it in a way that's complimentary and helpful.
Right.
Felt like a good time to aim at it.
Yeah. I feel like it's timely outside of even just it is the month in which we're focusing on this. This is such a needed conversation every month of the year.
Sure.
But for us to be able to double click on that and really lean into the resource side of it, lead into the practical next steps of, hey, we're meeting everyone in this because this is something that is for everyone.
Right.
I think there's a lot of value in doing it. And I'm really appreciative of how you are helping lead through, and especially leading through not just from a sense of intellectualism or a sense of I can speak up there about anything, but actually from a place of you've lived this, you've journeyed through this, and I love the vulnerability in which you've brought in this first message, because that's not an easy thing to do, and you could have gone in any other way as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's easy. My personality is one where it's pretty easy to be like, I'm just gonna keep going, and for me that was decades of my life, especially if you grew up with abuse. A lot of times it's easy for your coping strategy to be just put your head down, perform. Underneath the hood's kind of messy, but you can keep things together for a while.
Right.
And so I was kind of coming up to middle age at the same time that my dad passed away. And I just knew enough, my relationship with my dad actually was the best that it ever was in the last few years of his life. And I also knew that I was going to need to do some counseling practices like EMDR, where some of those memories that I just didn't have. I mean, I had maybe 5 vivid memories from 10 and under. And I didn't know, honestly, till I got married, that wasn't normal. I just thought that was everybody. And then Alyssa would describe vivid memories as a child. I'm like, that's weird that you remember that. And she's like, that's actually weird that you don't. And so I knew that when those things started to get unearthed, if my dad was still alive, it was going to be pretty painful to our relationship, and it wasn't his fault that I didn't remember them. So I waited. And, lots of people can make different decisions, but I waited. He passed away, and then I did a counseling intensive. And then that counselor that did my intensive, he's still my counselor now. That's 6 years ago now. So been very, very grateful for that work. And I think for people that they look at a pastor and they go, well, I'm not sure I'm allowed to talk about this in church, and then to hear that this is a part of my own pursuit of God, my own journey of getting help and finding healing. Hopefully it demystifies it a little bit. I obviously God's going to do whatever he's going to do with it. But if I say God's healing starts when our hiding stops, and I'm not willing to model that, that's a pretty empty phrase.
Absolutely. Can we get into a bit of maybe paint the picture of how it got mystified in the first place? How did the church at some point say, we just have to have enough faith for us not to be able to admit, or to say that we'll consider other options for mental health help, or for if I have enough faith, if I'm doing the right things, then eventually, even if I am hiding, God will still meet me in that place and help drag me out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it related to mental health is related to the history of the development of mental health in the world, specifically when we think about this related to the last 130 years or so. And I'm not going to try to sit here and be a historian, but if you go look at what sort of modern mental health got started up under, a lot of the scholarship related to that was actually a group of people that were trying to bring therapeutic benefit to people without God. And so it created very early on this schism between the disciplines of mental health, psychiatry, psychologist, and faith. That fracture only widened in the sexual revolution in the 60s.
Right.
And then you ended up with one group of people that were in the Jesus movement kind of saying like, Jesus can make everything all better. You just need to have greater faith. And then you watch revivalism sort of get started again. You watch TV evangelists get started, in major prominence. So that lane got really big and loud. And then on the other side, you had sort of mental health devoid of God got really big and loud.
Yep.
And I think it's really only been within the last generation where it's been like, okay, so how do we take the best? We've had to do this with science forever, right? Like, how do we take the best of this? All truth is God's truth. How do we take the best of this and incorporate it into our pursuit of God? There was nothing about these techniques, the ones that were helpful and good, that God couldn't use. As a matter of fact, many of them you could trace to spiritual practices that sort of got a fresh skin on top of them. I talked about it this weekend, but the idea that like we'll take Tylenol, we'll go to the doctor, we'll take antibiotics, we'll get a broken leg fixed. But for some reason, for a long time, because of this schism that existed between modern psychology and faith, I think that wedge got wider and wider and wider, and it's only in the last generation where I think it's become a little bit more acceptable. But I think if you talk to somebody who's older, it can oftentimes be why their experience of mental health is like, well, yeah, I don't need that. God's got me, and why I think the pendulum has swung perhaps a bit too far. Where sometimes if you're really young, you go, well, my experience of mental health is that's ultimate, that like if I don't feel good right now, instantly, circumstantially, something's like wrong with God. And I don't think that's the appropriate pendulum swing point either. I think, how do we develop resilience where we can get help when we're not okay and recognize that pain and problems and grief, those are all a part of the human experience in a broken world, even with mental health, even with spiritual health.
Yeah, thanks for helping kind of paint the landscape in which we're entering into the conversation from. And I'd love just for you to quickly kind of recap some of the main points of your message. You included a lot of great frameworks for us to think about how we might be in the place in which we are, maybe even wounds or stuff are shaping the way that we interface with the world, and how we can kind of start there to address the things that we might not know are controlling us, but really they are.
Yeah, well, I think that, foundationally, one of the things I didn't say this weekend, but I think is true, it's a line I heard years ago, that at the core, what we don't let God transform, we will transmit. And what that means is like you go, well, I don't want to be like my dad. I got really bad news for you as somebody that had a messy dad and a messy relationship with my dad. If it wasn't for the work that I did, I would have become my dad. Wow. And how many times do you hear that? Like, hopefully I wouldn't have hit my kids, but I would have been an angry, resentful, bitter, like that, in trying to run from and not be something and not face it and not get help. Very quickly, we can become the very thing that we despise. And so, I think underneath that to say, okay, God, I'm going to come out of hiding. I'm going to trust that you can bring healing in my life. Maybe that's directly, supernaturally. Maybe that's through key friendships and relationships. Maybe that's through professional support. Oftentimes it involves all three. But trying to just say, what does this look like? This problem is bigger than you think it is. We talked about some of the statistics of how pervasive this is. And I would say those statistics actually underreport what is true. And I bet if we had great statistics for our region, that anxiety is even higher in our region.
Yeah, for sure.
Because of the expectations, whether you're a student and all of a sudden, I don't know if you know this, but if you're a student in Silicon Valley, not all students in the country have the same pressure to go to an Ivy League or to go to Stanford or to, it is wild for me to hear the expectations. Well, I got to add one more extracurricular. I got to get, that just what we swim in is so pervasive, and getting help for that is not dysfunctional. It's actually what helps us live more integrated lives. So we tried to talk through what are some of the resources that are available even after the series, even resources that are not connected to Menlo, just resources. We put together a booklet to try to help people. And then we broke down kind of two primary ideas. One was like, what are the lies that we're believing? Because you can't simultaneously kind of think of it like you're grabbing a hold of something and it's a pretty heavy weight. And so you can either pick up lies or you can pick up the truth, but you're not strong enough to carry both. And so some of those lies that we talked about, we talked about sort of the individual lies that start, and this is not my framework. This is like a pretty known Christian counseling framework of I experience a wound, and I described one of those that I experienced as a child. That creates a vow. Like I just make an agreement and I go, I'm not going to do that. I'm always going to do, whatever. Like we make a vow. That vow eventually creates bondage because we've made that agreement. There's behavior we will or won't do because of that agreement. And that behavior, we stop asking if it's good for us. We just do it. And then once we've done that behavior long enough, it actually sort of takes root into our personality. It pushes people away. It keeps people at certain distance. And that becomes a stronghold. And actually, Scripture says that those strongholds can be things that actually only God can break. And so the longer we live in that, the more pervasive it becomes, the more help we're going to need. And not only do we live sort of with those as the customized lies that we can believe, but there's this general set of lies that we can believe. And I tapped into Henry Nouwen's what's called the three big lies, that I am what I have, I am what I do, and I am what people think of me. And we just spent a minute talking about like that's not true. Like of course we're tempted for that, but that's not true. And the truth is that God loves us. The truth is that God's love is unshakable. The truth is that we have power and love and a sound mind. The truth is that God really can be trusted in our lives. And when we have our fear misplaced into things and people that can't help, man, that's so disorienting. But when the Bible says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of understanding, that's this right understanding of who God is. And when we rightly understand God, then all of a sudden everything else we might fear gets so much smaller, so much more proportionate. And then we talked about how do you make sure that you're sort of being careful with the counselors that you select, not just professionally, but personally, and understanding, okay, there are going to be people in your life. What are the checks that you have for, are these good people? Are these helpful people in your life? And I think that it's easy to just do that out of convenience, or as the kids say, like vibe check, this is good. We enjoy hanging out together and that's fun. But if you're going to share emotional content, if you're going to be honest and real about what you're thinking and feeling, you need to ask some core questions. And so we talked about 4 ingredients of people who are safe, that like they slow down to really understand you. It's people with whom you feel seen, that they really do like look and take time and process. Safe also means that they are going to hold in confidence what you tell them. They're only going to share it when it's helpful and necessary. That it's secure, that like you can say something difficult or reveal something personal and they're not going to just bail on you, and that you're soothed, that they can express empathy when you have a really hard day or you're describing something that's really painful. They don't just breeze by it. They don't freak out. Like they can be someone that can sit with you in it. And just as much as in healing do we want to find those people, we actually also want to be those people. And so then at the end, we sort of pivoted to this idea of like, there are some people in your life that need you to slow down and look beneath the surface to find out what they need, and then be that kind of person. And this week it was really just sort of setting the table for, man, mental health is part of your spiritual health. God cares. There are resources available. We want this to be a safe place for that conversation. And if you'll lean in, there's healing for you even in that much.
Yeah. Let's kind of dive into that first point a bit. And I'm just curious, Phil, as someone that may have lived with lies and that's just kind of became the way that they interact and interface with themselves and with others, what are some tools or what has helped you maybe identify at the core, hey, where am I off in this? And what has been helpful in trying to take that first step of assessing, maybe how I view myself or the world or my interactions with people might actually be off at its core?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is who in your life do you trust enough to ask these questions of? Do you have people in your life that
For sure.
they would be willing to tell you. And don't start with the crummy stuff. Go like, hey, can you tell me, good question, right? Like, what's my superpower? If you were to like describe me to somebody else and you see something in me, because a lot of times when we're living in dysfunction, we actually don't think we have a superpower. Our superpower is like, we make the party bad when we show up. Our superpower is relationships fall apart when we're in them too long. Our superpower is our kids hate us. Like that, those aren't superpowers, right? And so I think just being around somebody that can see the good in you, I think our prescription gets a lot clearer when we can see, because you're like, doesn't matter how messy you feel like your life is, you are created in the image of God with infinite dignity, value, and worth. And we live in a broken world, and you're a fallen human being. But even if you don't know Jesus, you're an image bearer of the King.
Yeah.
And so if you say, well, there's nothing redeemable about me, you're actually saying more about God than you are about you. And so asking somebody in your life, hey, tell me what you see in me. And then, ask the question like, hey, are there shadows that I have that maybe I don't see, things that you see me like living into that are not true? And, I have people in my life that they'll say things like, oh, I know that you're probably thinking. And then they'll say some like terribly toxic thought that they assume I'm thinking about them. And I'm just like, no, like I'm not. I mean, you can believe me or not believe me, but I'm not thinking that. That's not true. And so I think some of us, it's just letting people in our lives, maybe that's a spouse, maybe that's a good friend, maybe that's a colleague, speak some of those truths into us. I do think for a lot of people, that is probably going to involve therapy at some point. Sure. I'm of the opinion that we go see a doctor once a year for a physical. I think it would probably just be a good human baseline for everybody to have a counseling relation. You have a primary care physician, to have like a primary counseling physician, like somebody that just on a semi-regular basis, even if it's every couple years, if everything's going okay, that you just have somebody you can check back into. And if it needs to be more consistent than that, great. And if you need to do an intensive to get it kicked off, fantastic. But I think trying to have some of that get broken apart, they may give you resources that your friend's not going to give you, to say, hey, you should go read this book. And we've tried to give some of those resources even in this series. But I think most of this is a lot stickier, makes a greater difference when it happens relationally. And then the sort of support and equipping can flow on the other side.
Absolutely. And ideally, as you mentioned, to be mindful about how and who we are picking as counselors. The counselors that we end up sharing these parts of our lives with do exhibit those four qualities. Whether that is professional counselors or whether that is not professional, or if not professional, there might be a little bit more grace about not being the best at all four at the same time.
Sure. Well, and I think professional counselors, they're going to probably do things that are a little bit, like every type of relationship is probably going to have some of those four S's that they're stronger in and some of them that they're a little weaker in. Nothing feels worse than when you're in a counseling session, you feel like you're finally getting there. And if you've ever been into a counselor, at some point the counselor's been like, well, that's our time, And so the idea of like feeling seen, you're like, I don't really feel super seen right now. Like, I guess my credit card
went
went
through, for another 10 minutes?
So, your friend, they might not, they're not going to be like, our time's up. Right. But for your friend, they may not be nearly as equipped to go, I know what it looks like to show up right now and really be a safe person. And it may be that something that you told them in the very best way they shared with someone else. Even in Christian world, we're really good at masking it as a prayer request. And you have to decide like how you show up in that. I would say that the more, if you were to put those across a spectrum, all four of those S's, and you were like, oh, this person's like a B here, this person's a C, this person's an A, whatever. The lower that people get on those scores, I would say the higher your boundaries with those people should be. Not even if you're just like not in a great place. Like healthy people in our life should help us feel seen and safe and secure and soothed. And I just say, if they don't, like, why are you friends with them? Like, you may have positive relationship, and I hope you do, but we should be more boundaried with people who are less safe.
There's a show that Missy and I Missy has been watching.
Sure, I like how
because-
you just throwing her under the bus
Well,
right now.
I wouldn't pick the show that
Sure,
we're talking
sure.
about,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm not gonna throw the show under the bus. Like, if I describe it, you could probably figure out what it is. But it's essentially a group of women that are all famous together because of TikTok, and it's like exploring their lives as a reality show. And
You're describing like most reality shows. now,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Oh, but the point being is like Missy will like try to psychoanalyze what's happening. I'm like, you are trying to undo stuff that isn't done up to begin with. So like I can understand like why you're wondering and feeling weird after watching this because
yeah.
that's not how we should interact with each other. That's not modeling any of the S's we just talked about.
Right.
Like
Some other S's. Yeah.
yeah, some 4-letter word S's for sure. But as we're extrapolating this out, Phil, and let's say at the end of this series, what would your hopes for our community look like as people that have just journeyed together for 3 weeks in this series? What attributes of the community you think would be like? Yes, we're starting to take steps. We're starting to make progress. We're moving forward with this.
I think that we are pretty good at sharing our overall story. We've gotten better at doing that in the last year, but I think that sometimes mental health is a part of our story that we edit.
Oh,
So we tell the big circumstantial updates of our life.
Yeah.
And then we just kind of gloss over, you sand down those parts of your life. And so you go, hey, I experienced a tough time and then God was faithful and whatever. But I think whether that is with vocabulary that you get or just being honest about it, I think that also taps into another thing we do with our stories is that we sand over pain points and we make sure that they all sound like they're pain points in the past and they're totally done. And so that's just not true. Like we know it's not true. And so being able to say, God's been tremendously faithful. I'm so glad. And I still deal with lots of anxiety.
Yeah.
And there are days that it feels like there's a heaviness on my chest that I can't overcome. There are days I wonder if this is just the rest of my life, like some people think when Paul talked about a thorn in his flesh that he prayed that God would remove, and he prayed multiple times, God never removed it. Some people think actually it was like mental health, that for Paul, he just couldn't shake past it.
Wow.
And so, I mean, whether that's what Paul meant or not, it's certainly what we can mean. Like and so this idea of like superficial triumphalism where, some bad stuff happened, but it wasn't that bad and God's so good and everything's better now. Come on. I mean, that sort of truncated spiritual formation, we know it's not true. We know it's not true ourselves.
Yeah.
We've seen it not be true in other people. And so I think being a community where we don't just like wallow in it, we're not just going like, well, this is terrible and it's never going to get better and I'm not getting help, but being able to say, hey, I don't know what to do about this. And the group to go, hey, let's pray about it together. And like, can I check in on you? And let's keep talking about it. And have you seen a counselor? And oh man, you know what? I saw a counselor. Let me tell you the counselor that was most helpful for me. And they had a treatment plan that was really helpful for me. And they gave me this medicine that was really like, I just think normalizing this conversation in a way that doesn't feel like it has to happen in hushed tones in a driveway after your life group, but it can happen like at your life group. It can happen around coffee. This is not like Jesus is over here and your mental health and its treatment is over here. Jesus wants to be right in the middle with you, walking through the pain that you might be experiencing. That, to me, all the different ways that shows up would be great. I also think it would be amazing if by the end of this, every counselor that's in our referral booklet that we put out, every single counselor is seeing somebody new that they're able to help with. I think that'd be a great win.
You can find that book at menlo.church/connect. And if you head to our website as well, menlo.church, you can check out our series resources for this, which will have a list of all of the resources that we've created for this series. So, Phil, thanks so much. We got some exciting other resources coming up, too. We got a podcast that's in the work as well, which will be really fun. So be on the lookout for that. And then again, if you need any prayer or encouragement, or, hey, if you just want to talk to someone, please reach out to us. We've got a wonderful team here that's equipped to help walk through anything that you're going through with you, to encourage you, to pray with you, and to point you towards accurate next steps. So you can text our team at 650-600-0402. Reach out to me or Phil. Have a wonderful week, everybody, and we will see you soon.
See you soon, everybody.
Bye.